Hi, this is Michael Waits recording live from Money 2020 Asia 2025 in Bangkok. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Insurance for the New Possible, where we discuss the future of finance, technology, and insurance. We are joined by our longtime guest, Om Bhatia, the head of digital and APAC for Chubb. Thank you as always for coming to the show, and thanks for participating in Money 2020 Asia. I really appreciate your time as always. How are you, by the way?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for helping us organize such a great event. It's always fun, a highlight to have you speak to our thought leaders, our partners, our leaders in Chubb. So it's always exciting to listen to your podcast. Thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome, and thanks for the kind words. Let's talk about Chubb's Digital Payments Trust Report. It highlights a massive projected growth in digital payments. It's almost $17 trillion by 2028. First of all, 2028, not that far away. And $17 trillion is just a gigantic number. What does this tell us about the pace of digital transformation, for lack of a better term, globally? And how do you see this playing out in Asia? What does it mean?
That's a great question. So the research you're referencing to, we spoke to 2,600 individuals across the world trying to understand their focus, how they're using digital payments. So what we've learned and what we know, right? What's happened, digital transactions have become so convenient through fintechs, through banks, everybody transforming how transactions are done. A lot of this convenience is driving a lot of growth. This convenience coming from how easy the fintechs and the banks have made it for transactions to flow through. This convenience requires, though, trust. And that's where I think we come in, right? So we try and add trust to these ecosystems through various of the programs that we do in partnerships with various partners and fintech players that we partner with.
Right.
Yeah.
When I think of some of the most transformative things that I see in payments, it's like the base rails, if you know what I mean. And the first place that I was exposed to this, knowledge-wise, not face-to-face, was UPI in India. You have Pix in Brazil. I don't want to talk so much about outside this region, but even in Thailand, prompt pay, I pay for everything with my phone, everything, right? I almost rarely ever carry cash. I always have to ask Martin, like, oh, we have to go to 7-Eleven. I don't have true money, so can you pay for this thing for me? And then in Singapore, it's, what is it, pay now. And now all those things are connecting. But you're right, this trust is a really important thing. And in Southeast Asia, where we live, right, these digital adoption with markets like Vietnam and Thailand leading in frequency, like I said, everyone I know in Thailand pays with their phone. But what kind of risks and opportunities do you see in these high growth digital economies based on all of this stuff that's happening in the payment space? What's good, what's bad, and where does Chubb fit in?
So as new platforms come in, new conveniences comes to this ecosystem, what's also happening is new risks are attracted to this, where the financial flow is in place, right? There are many markets where impersonation is a big problem. People are impersonating to be a known person, impersonating to be a family member, and trying to convince people to transfer money to them. Account takeover is a problem.
Takeover?
Yeah, so passwords get hacked, accounts get hacked on the dark web is what we understand.
Yep.
And to be able to prevent this from happening, not just reimburse them when the risk happens, and I'll talk about it in a couple of minutes. There are also job scams and various scams that are happening that are luring people into trusting a certain individual that's happening outside of the ecosystem. So this is not necessarily the platform having a weakness.
Right.
This is the kind of ecosystem that's playing outside the financial environment, trying to lure in or trick people into making a certain financial decision.
Right.
So it's very important, while there is robust controls in all banks and platforms there needs to be a customer protection, and there needs to be a customer awareness in terms of preventing them, educating them, but when the risk actually happens, being able to reimburse them so that they're not out of pocket.
Right. So, but where does that fit in? In other words, how do people understand that there is a way to protect themselves from these risks? Because I feel like a lot of people, and we were just talking to Renata, but she was scammed a couple of months ago. In the same way, somebody pretended to be somebody else that she trusted and created a sense of urgency. And it wasn't clear at the beginning that it wasn't the person that she expected it to be. And then by definition, she did the thing they wanted to do and then was like, oh no, that wasn't my mom. Right? So where would it fit in for someone like she is, or for someone like we are, where does that experience come where I can actually buy that protection?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's happened to me. I one time bought a phone from somebody online. When it got delivered, I got a bar of soap instead of...
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Can we back up for a second then? So you ordered a phone online from a reputable seller.
from a reseller platform that wasn't one of the e-commerce platforms.
Got
so
it.
reseller
But you didn't
platform.
expect to be scammed. So did you? Oh, so here's what I was thinking: that someone actually got the phone, delivered it to you, but then took it out and put some soap in. But what you're saying is there was no phone to begin with.
There was no phone inside. But what both of these examples of what
Right.
you mentioned and what I mentioned, what's happening is because the risk is so real, but if we step back and look at, say, traditional insurance, one had to anticipate this risk.
Right.
One had to go search a website, find a standalone insurance, or find an agent that would consult you about the type of risk that you have and be able to protect it.
Right.
What we've been able to do is find and work and co-create with partner platforms like fintech that are digitalizing transactions, being able to work with them, find these opportunities to educate, embed ourselves where it matters, and be able to personalize those propositions to who you are, to who a certain individual is based on the type of transaction they do. Do they
Right.
send more money to each other, to their friends? They need a different coverage versus somebody who's buying something online needs a different coverage.
So this is a really good point you bring up. So a lot of these scams are going to take place in chat apps. I don't want to name them because it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, the big ones in Southeast Asia. Is there a way to work with them? Because a lot of the communications are going to happen there. And I'm like, I trust this person. It happened here. That's the phone number, whatever it is. And then I get scammed. Is there a way to work with those apps as well to embed it into that experience so that when it happens, I'm like, oh, that's terrible, but I pay for WeChat insurance or something like that.
That's why you're the expert of what you do. You can foresee the future. So today what we do is we work at the last mile execution of the transaction. So wherever the financial exchange is happening, whether it's a purchase transaction, whether it's peer-to-peer transfer, because of financial transactions happening, the risk is far more real than conceptual at the time of imagining doing a certain
Yeah,
transaction.
I've never been scammed, so I don't even think about it, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Not that you know. I mean, good
Yeah.
you're not being scammed.
Yeah.
But
But
the
I do
amount,
think about it. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
the amount of data there is in the dark web for so many of us is unbelievable.
For sure.
And it is getting used not just from a financial impersonation, but it can be used in various other ways.
Right.
Thankfully, not to you. And that's why the coverage of it is important, but also the awareness of prevention of it. So today what we're doing with some of our partners is working towards dark web monitoring, more proactive alerts, more training and educational content beyond the reimbursement portion to say, if scam happens, this is how we will reimburse you. But for it not to happen, these are the steps you can take.
Right.
Rapid alerts if we find it in dark web areas, which we work with different partners to try and enable for us.
Yeah, it's a really important point, right? Like, if I do get scammed, what do I do? And here's the other question I have. And again, this just popped into my head. So if it's not appropriate, you just tell me. I like to say that from a business perspective, I take a long-term view on everything. Frankly, from a personal perspective as well, I don't really care about short-term things. I pay attention to them, but I'm more interested in what's going to happen 6 months out, 9 months out, 2 years out. Do you think that the scammers are getting so sophisticated, right? Because I, with very much confidence, said I've never been scammed. But then you said this word dark web, and there's all this information out there. Do you think there's a way to create like a long-term scam where they feel like the payout's going to be more than $47, that over time they're just building up information on people, and then boom, they'll hit when they feel like this could be $1 million hit for me?
Great question. Today, being able to introduce the concept of protection. Again, we go back to the research. The research says people are aware that scam is a big problem.
Right.
People are willing to pay insurance premiums for those scams.
Yeah.
But the willingness today is limited to transactional knowledge and transactional premium.
Right. I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to get coverage for it.
Yeah. So I know a balance in my wallet. I want to be able to protect that balance in my wallet. And that's all I'm thinking about. That's all I'm caring about.
Right.
Not the data that may be used for long-term impact, not for all the wallet balances and bank accounts and credit cards I have and so on. So it's not. But it will get there, right? It will eventually get there as people get familiar, comfortable, and feel the benefit of proactive marketing, proactive education and communication, preventive actions that they could take, reimbursement, which will become a long-term value. We are working with various partners on trying to use the micro data and transaction, but work with their segments in order to sell them a high value, fuller coverage products. But it's a journey, I think.
Can you bundle that with other products as well? Right. So if you're getting this type of insurance, you can also get scam protection insurance bundled into it, where it feels like it's part of that whole experience anyway, since you know you're going to buy life insurance, car insurance, like whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, ID theft and some of these, which we think are basic and core necessary insurance products, we try and bundle them with as many products as we can. Eventually, it's important to stay relevant to the client. So when you're buying a car insurance, we don't want to distract or try and pile in a lot of things to try and make your decision making tougher.
Right. It's like, I'm already deciding to do this, so I need to decide to do that kind
Correct.
of thing. Yeah.
Correct. So it's a journey. It's more and more cyber awareness, insurance, starting with embedded, moving on to more comprehensive, will become a normal life, given how much awareness is seeping in and how much the kind of impact these scammers are having.
I think there's this long-term trend happening where not just insurance companies, but other big companies as well are providing these like kind of other services. And you mentioned this idea of education. Where do you get to the point, like where is the point where you educate people so that they know that these scams are happening rather than just every 6 months doing a survey and telling the people that are in the survey? Do you know what I mean? Like, where does it fit in to the experience?
So that's a great question too. What is, again, necessary is relevance of these communication. A broad brush approach to everybody around the same content doesn't work. So with some of our partners, the type of transaction you're doing allows us to personalize even that communication, not just the insurance product. For example, if you are doing a peer-to-peer transfer and somebody you're transferring is for the first time, but you've just added the contact. So it's not a saved contact. It's not somebody you had on your phone before. That's a red flag. So different communication to them, creating awareness, getting a revalidation to say, are you sure? Then somebody who's transferring above the standard norms or their standard averages of transfer, that's a different communication, a different control for them. So a lot of this has to stay personal. A lot of this has to be relevant to the type of transactions people are doing. Eventually, the maturity will come when more and more people are consuming these products and finding benefits out of it.
Is there an information gap or even a behavioral gap between, I don't know, let's just say people older and younger people, right? I use my daughter as an example all the time. Her digital life is very different than mine. And I always say, like, I'm an early adopter anyway, so I'm not in a normal cohort. But how do you, if they are willing to pay, what other sort of relevant and contextual services can you build for younger people? Because you want them, normally their parents are buying them insurance. Like my first exposure to insurance was through my parents, but my daughter doesn't see that, and her whole digital experience is different. How do you create stuff for younger people so they can understand that they need to have coverage in this place and in that place and for scams and stuff like that?
What has changed between our generation and our kids' generation?
I think there's a generation between you and me, but I'll humor you on that one.
All right. So what's different is insurance were far more considered, far more engaged conversation, but that was a person-to-personal relationship.
Right.
Today, while we've broken insurance enough, we made it relevant enough, but it's both generations, the older and the younger generations, are similarly suspicious, similarly vulnerable to the type of scams that are happening. In fact, our research suggests that more younger population is getting scammed. Not only they have awareness of it, but they feel so confident in the convenience of the platform, they do not know any other way in order to transact, right?
No. Yeah, I mean, I don't think my daughter ever carries cash. Definitely when she's not at home. Sorry, go ahead.
So because they have a high influence on the number of transactions that are happening, they are high vulnerability in terms of getting scammed.
For sure.
So being able to speak to them on the platforms they have trust in. So they aren't necessarily trusting an insurance agent or necessarily spending time on that channel of getting education. They're getting a lot of their education through these platforms, the chat platforms, the social platforms.
Right.
Hence, the partnership with these platforms will allow us to penetrate and speak to them in the language they are comfortable with.
Is email still a big problem? Do you know what I mean? Like I probably get 4 emails a day wanting me to click on something that I know is wrong. But is that still a big problem for everybody? And is there a way to, because email is this like wild, wild west thing, right? Where there's no individual provider. Everybody can run their own email server. It's different than, there are 3 e-commerce platforms, big ones, right? But email is just like random in some ways, right? And anybody can send you an email if they have your email address, right?
It is decentralized. You'll be surprised as the percentage of email attacks or the attempt to get access to people's devices that happen on an email perspective.
Yeah.
So it is decentralized. It is one of the oldest method, but it hasn't necessarily stopped. It's getting more and more sophisticated.
Way more sophisticated. Yeah, like I would say 10 years ago, I used to get emails from, I'm just going to pick some big companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Nike, all these big companies that I might interact with. And it was very clear to me it wasn't from them. And I remember used to having to call my mom and just go, whatever this is, don't click on it. Yeah.
In our company, we have internal kind of challenges of when they do a spoof email to see whether you're educated and can you pick those things in house. So there's a lot of training in house, but they're getting a lot more sophisticated than before. So I don't think so. There's any channel necessarily safe, even if it was it was an old channel. Hence, the awareness part of it is important. Awareness by the type of channels you're using, by the younger audience, based on platform that you're using. We have to keep creating content around pieces and channels that are relevant to specific audiences.
Yeah, we should talk about this a lot more. One of the themes of this conference is collaboration. You touched on it a little bit before, but like, what are some of the challenges? And I'll put it in the context of bundling. I asked you before about you're buying car insurance, did you buy scam insurance? And you're like, kind of one thing at a time. Right. But you have these big partners with whom you collaborate. You're trying to build specific products for them that are contextual and relevant. Is there a place for then also having a conversation, or what's the challenge for building in some of this scam control as well?
Great question again. There's one thing about Chubb that we don't have a shelf where we pull in a product and sell to a partner or convince a partner.
I don't get that sense at all, actually.
So we co-create products based on the type of transactions, the type of risk, the type of ecosystem play, as well as the key strategy or the key need for the partner. In some cases, the partner is looking for more acquisition versus more retention versus more cross-sell. In those cases, they're doing a financial transaction for, say, peer-to-peer transfer or bill payment or online purchase, or they're a checkout. So being able to co-create products that are relevant to partner ecosystems has been a successful formula for us. But as Richard spoke about it yesterday, the next step is being able to use the data that we have on these customers on the consumption of this risk. So how many risks are happening by the demographics, by these platforms? What are the type of risk? How do we enhance our product proposition, but then use partner data in terms of personalizing these propositions to various ecosystems? Somebody who is used to having a higher balance and used to buying certain things from a certain platform, the kind of indulgence or the influence they have, they deserve a different, maybe a richer product, versus somebody who's using it for basic bill payment properties and the kind of coverages they need. So we're getting closer and closer to personalizing our propositions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Richard said, which I thought was really interesting, is that once they trust you, and then they can expose their internal data to you and think like, okay, we think we might need this kind of product. Because this idea of co-creation, I think, is foreign to a lot of people, right? Like you said, most people think there's a shelf there. I'll take 2 of those and 1 of those. But the reality is you're not doing any of that. You're just going, here's all the things we know about you and your customers. What do you need? And then let's go together and co-create that together. It's just a different way of looking at things. Yeah.
And it is true that a lot of that has worked from an embedded proposition perspective. So we are a checkbox in the process today, but a lot of that is moving towards high value products of what your earlier question was. How do we use this data? An example on an e-commerce platform is if you're buying a mobile phone and a washing machine and a refrigerator, and all of them you've chosen to buy insurance coverages. We know you have a household. We can give you a home insurance. I think
it's your washing machine. You must have 3 kids. Otherwise, why are you buying something
Absolutely.
that big?
So instead of continuing to attach a certain premium on ensuring that one particular item, using that data to give you a comprehensive policy, because we assume your location, your net worth, the type of risk that you may have, the type of family size you may have, being able to provide a comprehensive insurance is where we are heading towards. So continue with the micro, garner that data and that insight from the user and be able to move them to a higher tier product that is relevant to them.
I love it. Okay. When you and I are having this conversation 3 years from now, which I know we will be, what progress do you want to have seen? Like, what do you want to have changed? If you could do a little bit of magic, wave a wand and say, I really hope in 3 years, at least this has happened.
We saw the traditional insurance, which was a very conscious, heavy decision to be made in the past, discussing with an agent, going to websites, researching a lot. It was a lot of effortful decision. Today, where we are, it is a very seamless decision. So we are hidden in a journey. We are passive. We are enhancing partner value proposition. But what I foresee is something in between that, where insurance is hidden where it needs to be, but it's a more conscious, but a digital, seamless proposition.
Like, I need this thing, but there's a very easy way for me to get it.
Yeah, I need this thing. There is an easy way for me to find out what I need.
Right.
being able to be justified and convinced very quickly using my personal data that I have with my trusted partners. And I'm getting something that is so personal and relevant and so obvious to me. So we maintain the seamless execution and the seamless purchase of it. But the consultancy part becomes digital, personal, based on trusted platforms that we work towards.
Got it. This was awesome. Om Bhatia, the head of digital APAC for Chubb. You're so good at this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoy talking to you all the time. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the time.